Hello gainers, welcome to my channel called Fitter Philosophy. I'm the host, my name is Ralphie, and on this channel I generally discuss stoic, experience-based philosophical stuff. But I also occasionally have a series on funeral stories because I worked in Glasgow for over 20 years as an undertaker. And during that time, because of the volume of funerals that Glasgow attended to, and still does, I was kept very, very busy most of the time. Even a quiet day was never too quiet. And during this time, I also encountered a lot of characters and a lot of ordinary people leading the most extraordinary of lives under the most peculiar of circumstances. And I'm going to relate one such individual to you right now, and it's a very inspiring story. Muriel was quite content leading the simple life. A small woman, unassuming, quiet, an attentive listener, sympathetic, cheerful disposition, and a breezy optimism. That's how you could sum up Muriel. She looked the part. She had a little round bob of grey hair, glasses with thick lenses that make your eyes look bigger, and her teeth, I would say, slightly on the large side, which gave her a slightly cartoonish appearance. And once you met Muriel, you would never forget the face. She had an unlucky incident, though. Her husband died, and at this point, after his death, was when she discovered that he had another girlfriend, and that he had been giving her a lot of his money from his pension. Under the terms of the pension, Muriel did not get any cut of it. So she was literally living with her husband, 2 pensions and a company pension, and suddenly she was relying exclusively on her own state pension. Because although she had worked part-time in her life, it was very part-time and lowly paid, and she hadn't done it. Because basically, she was a housewife. She was a stay-at-home mother. Her daughter was a disappointment, because the daughter got involved in drugs, kept bad company, despite the best efforts of her parents. And the result was that when she had a son, the grandparents, Muriel and her partner, decided that they would look after the son to protect him from being exposed to the dangers of drugs. This they did quite well. However, on the passing of her husband, she was on her own with her grandson, who at this point was just late teens, and was starting to make his own way in the world. He really wanted to be, first of all, he wanted to be a gardener, and then he wanted to be a horticulturalist. And the reason was simple. They lived in a flat, a humble flat, in the west side of Glasgow, overlooking a public park called Victoria Park, which is a large park. It's generally well looked after. It has a lot of interesting features, including fossilised trees, a large pond, and a substantial rock garden walk-through area. And he loved it. He would go over there to kick his football, because they had a football field. He'd get his exercise, and inevitably, at some point, he started talking to the gardeners. And they basically adopted him because of his cheery disposition. And at one point, he was given a plant to take home for his nan, his gran, which he did. And she potted it up and put it in the kitchen windowsill, because they lived in a flat. And They brought it on and it started to grow, and this is what cultivated his interest, no pun intended, cultivated his interest in plants. It's gone out, never mind. As he grew up, thinking of something to do, he realised that he'd have to specialise and get skills and qualifications, and it would have to be something that interested him. So he started by doing a few gardening projects for people in local houses. He earned pocket money from that. He then got a job in a bar, hated it, hated people when they're drunk, which isn't difficult to do, and then decided he was going to do an open university course because he couldn't afford to go to college. So he started his open university course while freelance gardening and trying to get jobs to make ends meet. And of course, when his grandfather had gone and his grandmother had to make do, he ended up having to support her supporting him. At some point, and we're not sure where it happened, but Muriel came into the funeral parlour and told us all about it. They went to a bargain thrift store type place. I think it was B&M it's called. And in the garden section they saw that the little potted plants were discounted because they had dried out and wilted a bit and nobody was buying them. And so they bought them, and Muriel watered them with what they call rested water, not water straight out the tap, and gave them a little bit of a feed and brought them on, and they soon outgrew their pots. And so she got bigger pots from a neighbour, potted them up, and then she started painting the pots. Just simple little designs, colouring them up, and she interplanted the plant with little kind of umbrellas and pipe straws and she basically sort of animated a potted plant to make it more colourful and more stand out, so it wasn't just a potted plant. And she enjoyed it. So they bundled the plants into the back of a car and took them to a car boot sale. And they flew. When they saw the money they were making from the sale of these plants, they realised they had a valuable source of income. They never turned it into a chore. They always kept it as a hobby. And they started to get known at car boot sales. And then grandson bought a hat from a neighbouring stall, which was in the shape of a sunflower with petals round it, for his nan. She put it on, and she looked even more like a flower pot lady. They were selling other things at this point. She was making homemade soap, which is easy to do, potash and oils. She was using coconut oil, putting in a little bit of colouring dye and putting in some essential oils. Simple packaging, and it was flying. They became a bit of a staple for a while at car boot sales until she got too infirm for it. But at that point, the grandson had got his job as a gardener at a big estate, simply because of his knowledge of exotic, rare, hard to grow plants. That's what clinched the job for him. He'd passed his open university, which is an invaluable source of education, and it costs you a fraction of what it would be to disrupt your life going to college, university, to study things full time. And he was doing well in life. He was establishing himself. He was in a tied house. He was well respected by his employer. So essentially, when you've got a rich employer, you've got a job for life. So she went down, initially to visit him, but latterly to be cared for by him rather than going to a nursing home. And the only reason we heard about this was because the neighbours kept in touch. Because neighbours do that. And they would go down and visit her because it was a great day out. The home baking was there, the tour around a private estate garden because it was permissible, because they were vetted friends of the gardener. And it just shows you how ordinary people grabbing opportunity and keeping a positive mindset can challenge and overcome adversity with the simplest of tools.